It's almost impossible to describe the height of expectations that BB Nate had going into our viewing of The Batman earlier this week. He knows everything there is to know about the production of this movie. He has read hundreds of reviews, and all of this just raised his expectations even higher. So coming into this week, his excitement had actually rubbed off on me and Sam, and we were at a crazy level too. So the question is, did The Batman come close to delivering? We'll answer that question next. This is Tatooine Sons.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody listen to it.
Welcome to Tatooine Sons, the only fan podcast to name an official Star Wars creature and to be endorsed by the writer and director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, that there is a story. It is written on our souls, and that these myths speak to that story. And that is why I am so excited to share this special episode of the show with you today, where BB Nate and Samuel the Hutt are giving their reaction to The Batman, releasing in theaters worldwide today. If you are a regular listener of Tatooine Sons, you already know that BB Nate is a massive fan of Batman comics and stories. He's got hundreds of comics in his room, and he's been anticipating this movie for years now. We had the privilege of seeing the special IMAX screening of The Batman on Tuesday evening, and we're here to give our spoiler-filled thoughts on the Caped Crusader and his rogues gallery, including the Riddler and the Penguin and Catwoman and, oh, well, maybe we'll hold that last part back for later in this episode. The Batman opens and closes with Bruce sharing his internal dialogue in a very classic film noir style. Lots of reviewers are mentioning it. But this isn't a central component of the Batman movie because it's trying to be a noir film. It's a part of this film because it's classic Batman comic book style. So I asked BB Nate about this and his thoughts on the film opening this way.
I was just already so excited about this movie when they started doing that. It was the fact this was rumored months ago, and I got really excited because I love the idea of kind of having the little not the thought bubbles, but the thought text boxes that was very present in a lot of Batman comics, especially, you know, as you guys read in Court of Owls and all that stuff. And so I was super excited to have that rumor, but I kind of forgot about it because it died off and then it happened and I was just freaking out. I was so excited to see it like that because that is just such a comic book thing to do. And it works so well for Batman. It really plays into the Batman ego comic that Robert Pattinson said he took reference from, which is a conversation between Batman and Bruce in his own head and who's the real and the psychology of that. It's really just all of his thoughts and what the Batman really is. So how they opened it like that is really playing reference to that. So yeah, I was already, when I saw that, I'm like, okay, this movie's going to be just fine. I was like, it's already sold me. So
did it pull you into it as being a comic book movie right off the bat? Oh my gosh,
right off the bat. And it felt so Batman-esque. I mean, I guess we're going to go into spoiler territory.
Oh yeah, this whole thing is spoilers.
So I don't think this is mentioned on later on in the episode, but the whole fear aspect was fantastic. The thought of we see three different crimes going on, and he's only at one, but all of them think he's there in the darkness, and that is just such a Batman thing to do. Just the fear that he's already put into the criminals as who he is, and so yeah, that was really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, both the text bubble or the text bubbles, the narration and the use of fear and shadows were something that I really liked from the beginning too. I mean, they did a great job of setting the tone early in the movie. They made sure to let you know what this movie was going to be like early on. And those scenes were a good part of that. When he started narrating, I was like, this is just like Court of Owls, because I had just recently started rereading that. And there's a lot of narration from him on it. I mean, like 90% of the dialogue is his own narration. Not the case in this movie, but it is a very, like you said, Batman comic thing to do. And it worked super well in this. And with it being a part of this Gotham project, it makes sense that he would kind of talk about it. We even see when he's writing in his journal, he writes down one of the thoughts he had that we heard in the narration. So it lends itself to the story very well.
Yeah, the journal, was that journal mentioned in before the Batman?
It was a main part of the book. It was the beginning of his journey to be the Batman. We even saw a couple entries in the book, like the epilogue had that in it, and we learned it was called the Gotham Project, and we learned what he wrote in it and everything, and he's going to go day by day and write what happened in that day to further the Gotham Project or because of the Gotham Project and that kind of stuff. So it was mentioned a lot in the book, which was cool. It was a little Easter egg for the people that actually read the book. So
there was a lot of those little Easter eggs, but not really geared towards. We're going to spend most of our time on the Tuesday's episode next week talking about the connections to the comic books and how there's so many of those in there. That's our main topic for that part of the show. But, for you as a comic book fan, without getting into the weeds on it, BB Nate, what was it like for you as a Batman comic book fan to watch this movie?
It felt like it did really feel like a love letter. It felt like we were finally getting something that we wanted to see for so long. Even with, 89 Batman and all that stuff, while it was fine, it never felt like a comic book movie. I don't think we've ever really had a movie where I walked out of it and I'm like, that felt like a comic book movie. I've always called them superhero movies, but I walked out of this one saying it was a comic book movie. And I mean, when we're looking at that, Batman is the one person that has changed comics forever. I mean, DC's named after his series. You got to think about that. He's probably behind Spider-Man, the most famous comic book character and the longest running one of all time.
I don't know. Superman's pretty famous himself.
Superman is pretty famous himself, but the thing is Batman has been running longer. Has been around just by like a month or something, but still, Batman has kind of changed. It's always been the turning point for a character in how we look at comic books. I mean, he was the one that influenced the darker side of comics in the 80s with Dark Knight Returns and Year One and Nightfall.
These are comic books that came out in the 80s.
And they changed how we looked at comics. They weren't the big, bright, colorful, fun things you'll find in magazines. They were stories that were psychological and broke down the psyche of these characters that you've come to love, thinking that they're invincible, but they really aren't. And so seeing that portrayed in a movie finally is what I loved. And of course we saw a little bit of that in Dark Knight Rises, but not to the extent that we saw it in this movie.
No, this movie definitely did something different that even just the other Batman movies didn't do. It was grounded and real, and both the storytelling and the setting of Gotham, how they portray Gotham, and the cinematography and everything like that made it feel like you were watching a comic book or a graphic novel. Everything about it was set up to give you that feel, and it executed it perfectly. So I think you're right. And I like what you said about it, Batman being such like a turning point character in different mediums. I think in terms of DC movies, this will be a turning point, 100%. I think DC needs to start following in the footsteps of this movie.
And it's interesting because they do have several other movies that are scheduled to come out this year with The Flash, with Black Adam, Aquaman 2. Aquaman 2, The Lost Kingdom or whatever. So, and those feel like they go down the other path. They're the superhero movies.
I think we'll see The Flash becoming more emotional, dealing with his mother. That's what Flashpoint Paradox did. Right. So I think we'll be seeing them like, okay. And with the director, it'll go that way too. Okay. So
Cool. Well, from the the moment that Robert Pattinson was announced as the star of this the Batman movie, fans and critics have expressed concern over his ability to pull off this complex character. So, BB Nate, I know you've been on board with Pattinson for a long time now, so I'll get to your thoughts on that in a minute. Sam, what did you think of Robert Pattinson's portrayal of both Batman and Bruce Wayne in this movie?
It was very different than what we had seen before in a very good way. He was, for lack of a better term, awkward, but not in like an awkward teenager kind of thing. Like, he just doesn't quite know how to fit in, right? He's not sure which version of him is best. You know, as Batman, he doesn't really talk very much, which honestly lends himself to the character. He just gives people side eyes and they listen. But you know, he's still getting used to that. But then when he's supposed to be his billionaire playboy, he's a recluse, like a recluse. He doesn't come out very much. When he does come out, he's not quite sure how to interact and stuff, just because, I mean, let's be honest, he's an orphan. He was orphaned at a young age and he really didn't get out very much to socialize super well. And so he's still figuring out how everything should work together. He's not the billionaire playboy that we see in pretty much every other portrayal of the Batman. And it works really well for the story because this is a newer Batman. He's 2 years into this. He's still figuring out the ropes, and he does a great job of portraying that. Yeah.
Do you think we get that version of Batman later if they continue this series, that he becomes more of that billionaire confident playboy Bruce Wayne that we're used to in other things as he tries to move forward into the role that we see him, which we'll talk about later on, but the way he kind of continues?
I think based on how we see the end, or what we see at the end, his pivot in his character will lend himself to being that more confident superhero, and he's probably going to realize he can still do good as Bruce Wayne as well, not just Batman, in which case he'll have to get out of his shell a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Robert did a fantastic job with this movie as Batman. Somebody said they should give Robert Pattinson's bottom half of his face an Oscar, because, which I agree with. He portrayed so much emotion without speaking a word, which is such a skill to do, and he did it fantastically. I think as Bruce, he did an amazing job as well, especially the year 1 Bruce. In year 1, Bruce isn't that confident as himself as a playboy, but he can be Batman. He's more confident in approaching crime lords and stuff as Batman than he is as Bruce. So that was playing into that very well. And I know that it was a heavy influence on this movie. So I loved how they were showing that. And I love the fact that I think they established in this movie, even without saying it, that Bruce Wayne is the real mask of who he is. Batman is truly what Bruce Wayne is. Mm-hmm. So, and that's something that has been an argument as almost as big as who would win in a fight, Batman or Superman, for years against DC fans. Who's the real mask? And I think in this one, they established that it's Bruce Wayne. So I really loved the fact that they portrayed that so well. And the fact that Alfred's trying to have Bruce become more of that billionaire playboy, like, just, you need to get out more so that you can, people aren't getting suspicious about where you are, even if you're still alive, because some people didn't know where he was until he showed up at the memorial later on in the movie. So it's an interesting take, but Robert did such an amazing job at it. And I cannot wait to see more of what he will do in the Gotham PD show and hopefully other movies.
Is it confirmed he's going to be in those movies, those other properties that are getting ready to come out?
In the Gotham PD show, he'll probably be a side character, one that shows up every other episode, maybe. But it's going to focus on the police side more and how they're dealing with Batman.
Potentially how he builds that relationship with.
Yeah, we'll probably see the whole thing that happened with Gordon and the tension that we had between Gordon and the rest of the cops, and that establishment of that relationship in that show.
That's good. So, obviously, the other side of this movie is not just the Batman. It's this version of the Riddler, which is very different than anything we've seen before in film and TV and even, in the comics at this point. Paul Dano's performance as Edward Nashton / the Riddler for both of those was absolutely terrifying. BB Nate, as Tatooine Sons' resident Batman expert, what do you like the most about this version of the Riddler?
I love the the realism of it. Like Sammy has said before, and I think we've all established, serial killers are kind of the closest thing we'll have to supervillains in our real world. And so they made it more like that, but of course with a little bit of a comic twist. He's a little bit more exaggerated than what you would see an actual serial killer do. But he was still terrifying to the point that we could get scared by this. If something like this did happen, we would be freaked out. It's not as crazy as, I don't know, Doomsday or something that.
So some alien coming in from space or something.
I loved the fact of just the terror that he struck. It was actually a villain that I could be scared of. Like at the beginning, he's just standing there in the dark and the guy has absolutely no idea he's there. That could be happening to us at any point. And so it was
especially after what happened in the mail this week.
Exactly.
All right.
But this version of the Riddler is actually one we have seen before in mainstream media, or at least close enough. In the Batman the Telltale series, The Enemy Within, the second season, Riddler is kind of the main villain of that series, and he's a lot like this one. The elaborate traps, the riddles, like the bomb caller. If you don't answer these riddles in time, you're gonna die by this elaborate trap. It happened a lot in the game, and it's a very
that's a game
character. Yes, it was a kind of a game story little thing, a choose your own adventure. Like you have dialogue moments and everything. Fantastic story. It also has Joker in it. It is one of the best Batman stories told in games. Really? Both seasons are fantastic, but Riddler is a big part of it, and he's kind of the whole. I mean, I've compared these two a lot, so I was happy to see that in a movie. Of course, it was dumbed down from that version. It wasn't as superhero-esque because it was very comic booky in that game because they could go more with a game than a movie. But I really love this version of the Riddler.
What did you think, Sam?
Oh, I thought he was.
Since you're the Riddler cosplayer in the group.
No, I thought he was terrifying. Just from the first moment we saw him, they established the tone of that character. Excuse me, and I hadn't really been genuinely frightened at a villain in a comic book movie in a long time. I mean, Heath Ledger's Joker was unsettling, in a heavy way, twisted. But this guy was genuinely the Riddler was genuinely pretty frightening at times, and you were like on edge when you were watching this. But even when he wasn't in the Riddler suit, or he wasn't as Riddler, when he was just Edward Nashton, he still portrayed this just absolutely insane person who believed that they were nothing but if not right. It was really well done. Yeah.
Which then he ends up in Arkham Asylum next to. I mean, are we going to talk about it? We should. I mean, it's not part of the normal thing, but Barry Keoghan as the unnamed Arkham Asylum inmate.
You don't
or the patient.
The patient doesn't mention being a clown and then laughing and having a scarred face without it being the Joker.
Yeah. You were pretty freaked out. You were not in a positive, excited way.
I was super excited. I was pumped to see this. Right as I saw, I was like, okay, here's a moment. I'm like, who is he? Because we didn't know who it could be at that point. We knew Barry Keoghan was in this movie. He even showed up to the red carpet premiere, but we had no idea who he was playing. And then the leaked cast, he had prosthetics makeup for an unseen person. Why would you have prosthetics?
Right.
So it was always kind of a rumor and a guess as to who he would be. And we really had no clue. But then we start hearing him talking to Edward, and he's like, don't be too mad. You still won. You still did a pretty good job. And started just talking and everything. And then they talked about being friends. And then he started laughing, and we saw his face at least as best as we could. And the scarred mouth. And it's kind of a mixture of Jack Nicholson's Joker with the permanent smile, mixed with the jagged, scarred face of Heath Ledger. It's like you're mashing.
Is there a comic book version or an animated version that fits this?
Liebermejo's Joker by Jeff Lemire is very similar. Looks really similar. I've heard great things about the series. I'm about to read it myself after seeing this, because I'm pretty sure they're going to take influence from it. But it looks very similar, and I'm wondering if they're going to be going with that path. And the fact of The face looks like the first time an acid ruined face. We haven't really seen that. I mean, I know that Jack Nicholson had the whole acid thing, but his face was perfect besides the smile. It looked really weird and just off.
It did look weird.
It was insanely campy and comic booky. But now it's jagged. It's not right. It's not perfect. It's just like Joker. Yeah. And I'm wondering if we will see his origin at least play out in the Gotham PD show.
Yeah, explain what, because Matt Reeves just in the last 24 hours has given an interview, and we, wish you the best, Matt. Get over COVID.
Yes,
that sucks.
That is
so
terrible.
bad.
I'm so sorry
that he missed the premiere because of COVID. When we found out about that just minutes before before the premiere Tuesday night, we found out about it, and it was just devastating. But he gave an interview and he was talking about the 2 series that have been announced. We know about the Penguin series, and we know about Gotham PD. And he at one point mentions it wouldn't be on the Penguin series, I think, but that Arkham Asylum is going to play a role in the other series, is what he said.
In one of the series. It can't be Penguin because that wouldn't work out, but it'll most likely be the Gotham PD show due to the fact that it is taking place in year 1 of Batman's career, and they're going to be using that as a way to establish Batman and just kind of lead up to this movie, give you some backstory on the city and the villains himself.
So do we see Robert Pattinson's Batman in year 1 arrest and maybe his foil, his villain is Joker in that series?
I'm not sure if it would be a foiled villain. I think that it would maybe just be like what it is in Killing Joke, the kind of agreed upon origin of Joker, a guy who is trying to get money for his wife, and he eventually is taken in by this gang and has to do one job, and so he puts on this red hood disguise, which is really classy. It's really cool looking, but it's to the point where they break into Ace Chemicals. They're on the catwalk next to the vats of acid, and Batman's doesn't even land a punch on him, but Joker is so scared of him that he trips on his own cape and falls into the vat of acid. We might see that again wouldn't break the no killing rule, because Batman wouldn't have thought he killed at that point. It would be Joker's own fault, but he would still blame Batman for the terror, and Batman would forget about it. Just, okay, the guy's gone. So
before we move on, I want to make sure that everybody listening to this show right now realizes that all of that came straight out of BB Nate's head. He has no notes. He's not on his phone or on any computer. Everything about the Batman that he just said is coming from his knowledge of the Batman. So if you need anybody to join you on your podcast or your YouTube show to break down the Batman, he may be the guy to reach out to. Let's pivot real quick. This wasn't on the list of things we're going to talk about. So, but Sam, he was talking about the Red Hood, which makes me think about a certain red hooded character that shows up at the very opening of this and plays in there. The mayor's son is dressed up in a ninja costume playing around at the beginning of this. It's on Halloween, and his character, the little boy, his character keeps showing up throughout this movie from the opening all the way to the very end of this movie. Sam, are we getting the Robin in this series at some point?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I hope, but I also kind of am okay if we don't at the same time. I mean, and that could be because there's not been a great track record with Robins so far.
I don't know.
In live action.
We've only had Chris O'Donnell.
And we did have Robin in Dark Knight Rises. You can't forget about him.
A guy named Robin.
I know. He's more Nightwing than anything, and we didn't even see him in action. But I mean, his name is Robin, which, gosh, that was comic booky.
I mean, I think that there's a very real possibility. I don't even know if it would be that kid, though. I mean, I feels like it's almost too on the nose for them to go with that kid to make him Robin. I mean, because they didn't really go too on the nose of anything in this movie.
That's true.
But would I be against the concept? Absolutely not. If they could pull it off, I think it would work. But I think right now, this Batman is too new, too fresh to bring on a Robin yet. He's still figuring himself out, let alone bring on an apprentice, basically. I think you have to wait a little bit.
But it was a really interesting dynamic between the Batman and the Riddler in this one. And so, and part of the reason, kind of going back to what you were just talking about there, it's such a grounded story. There's such realism in it. It's not, it's not following a superhero theme. And so that was one of the things that made this story so compelling. Can't wait to see it again. Like everything else in the Batman, Paul Dano's Riddler is grounded in a believable story. You can actually see why Edward Nashton has become obsessed with Bruce Wayne. And the corruption of the system in Gotham City makes it even more realistic. It's what makes this a different story from so many other Batman films before it. I do want to take just a minute to encourage you to check out this episode's sponsor, The Hero's Journal. We've begun a quest to better ourselves and our lives through this amazing tool that uses the power of stories and scientifically proven productivity techniques to help fans like us take control of the story that we tell ourselves. Changing our story takes small changes over a period of time. It's not giant moments of inspiration. It's those small, consistent actions. And the Hero's Journal provides a fun and powerful way of taking those steps and actions. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking a lot more about the Hero's Journal. But if you want to take your first steps now, go to theheroesjournal.co to learn more. Again, that's theheroesjournal.co. One of the coolest moments in the trailers for the Batman is the glimpse of that car chase between the Penguin and the Batman. But what we saw in those trailers was only the tiniest fraction of what we get in the actual film. I asked Sam why this is one of the best moments in the Batman.
I mean, not only is it just a really cool car chase scene, but it further solidifies the idea that in the criminals' minds, Batman is this unstoppable, invincible force. He's got, not only is he bulletproof, but his car is bulletproof and can drive through like trucks, explosions and stuff. It's further solidifying that fear and everything. And even at the beginning, when he's like starting up his car and it's in the alleyway, it's like a monster. You could just see Penguin getting terrified at it. I mean, it was such a great scene, not in just the action, but it still developed the character as well.
Yeah, I mean, you had the whole scene where he pulls up next to Penguin and he's shooting the window and it's doing nothing, and then you just see Batman slowly look over like, what are you doing? Like, it's doing absolutely nothing. And the terror in Penguin's eyes, like, I can't defeat this guy. So he at that point decides, I'm just gonna try to run away. And so the terror in Penguin when he gets stuck behind those cars and he's taking extreme measures to get away was perfect, because it was just this imposing feeling of dread coming up right behind him. You keep seeing the camera look over at his mirror, and it's just getting closer and closer, like a monster.
It's like a shark, which again in the water.
Is another great part of the cinematography in this movie. The car chase scene cinematography was fantastic. So many great things in it. But you have the rage and the kind of intensity you have from Batman in that scene is great too. The absolute drive to get Penguin was amazing to see, because that's something we haven't seen a lot with car chases in Batman, and that's a really important thing.
Batman is known for his car in everything, right? I remember being a little kid watching the original Batman series when it was in reruns, and it was like, I needed a convertible. I mean, that's all I could think of. Every convertible to me when we drove past it when I was 4 was a Batmobile.
Nice.
With it. But he's also known for gadgets and other things. What did you guys think about some of his little tricks and I mean, obviously he's got, the grappling hooks and all those kinds of things. But what did you think about some of the different gadgets he had?
I mean, I liked how he wasn't kitted to the teeth, really. He had a couple pretty useful gadgets here and there, but every one of his gadgets was like, I could see that working. None of it was too outlandish. He didn't have, well, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, but he didn't have batarangs yet, which is pretty flashy and comic booky. He just has some grapple guns that he uses. He's got his flight suit, so he doesn't even use his cape, which, again, grounded. He's got, what else did he use? He's got like
the little bombs.
Little charge bombs. He's got the eye things, which honestly, those aren't too far off from being real anymore either. Like the
eye contact
cameras,
which is just like detective mode for this movie.
Yeah, honestly. And then I saw even at the end he's got some road flares. I'm like, I could see him having some flares, But it's all very simple, and I really liked that. He's got basic stuff that he just needs to get the job done.
Yeah, I loved the gadgets, especially the symbol on his bat suit being a knife. That was really cool. It's tactical. It even looks cool without the knife in it, which it was awesome. But I liked how it was simple. Everything was tactical. He didn't waste any space. He used the symbol to be a holder for that knife. Everything was just really streamlined. We had the adrenaline or whatever that was.
What is that? What do you guys think that is?
I really do think it could be Venom, judging by how in the comics Venom was introduced through Batman in the Legends of the Dark Knight run. Venom, Batman started taking Venom because the villains were just becoming too much for him. He started taking more and more Venom to get more muscle and become more powerful to be able to take down these villains. And then he started to go absolutely insane, and he just started to get addicted to it to the point where he had to keep using it to live. And then eventually Alfred and a bunch of other people kind of weaned him off, and then we introduced Bane right after that. So I think we will be getting that in this series, that kind of version of Bane, which I would love to see a Bane in this universe. I think it could be really cool, and maybe introducing it that way would be awesome. But I loved his gadgets. I loved the wingsuit. That idea, you could tell that in this movie, it was one of the first times he's used it. And
how many chances do you have to jump off of a skyscraper? So.
You could tell he was scared. Not scared, just like, okay, well, this is the moment. And so, and he didn't, and I loved when he didn't land it right. He failed. He kind of fumbled the ball.
He got knocked around.
He got knocked around, which is great because he's a young Batman. He's not refined. He doesn't know how to do this yet. And it was great. I love that.
This Batman is very different than obviously the first run of Batman movies, and even Christian Bale or Ben Affleck's Batman, because those Batman are heavily dependent on their money and their gadgets. In those stories, and this one is not dependent on those things. It is truly a Detective Comics version of Batman. It is one that doesn't have the super fancy utility belt. You're not going to get any bat shark repellent and that kind of stuff.
Smoke bombs,
any of that kind of stuff. It's just a guy that's trying to find his way into this character of being the Batman.
I'm pretty sure they teased a way to give him the idea for the smoke bombs when he threw the bomb on the fire extinguisher and it created that smoke. I'm pretty sure that gave that away for him the idea of the smoke bombs. Like, okay, that actually worked well in my favor. So
let's be able to duplicate that whenever I need to.
Also, my mind went to disappearing from that. I liked how we saw two versions of him disappearing. One where he wasn't able to disappear, so he just punched Gordon in the face and then was running away, which is great. It was great seeing Batman run away, but they still gave us the classic Batman just disappearing while someone's in the middle of their sentence with Gordon. So that was cool.
That was awesome. But as we, you deal with this year 2 version of Batman, this Batman that's still trying to figure himself out, figure his gadgets out, figure his relationship with Gordon out, figure his relationship with Alfred out. With that, which fortunately it seems like they come to a place at the end.
That was a fantastic scene.
Yeah. It's interesting to think of it that way, because a lot of the reviewers leading into this movie and the critics have labeled the Batman as an origin story for Batman's rogues gallery. But we kind of disagree after watching this movie. This feels like a very unique take on an origin for who Batman truly is, from the comics, kind of an idea, a symbol of hope for a city who desperately needs it. We really see that in the moment at the very end of the movie. BB Nate, explain that moment on the roof of Gotham Square Garden.
So Batman's spending all night saving civilians from the Gotham Square Garden building, which is perfect. I mean, he spent all of his time and energy saving civilians, and he's saving this one civilian and putting her on the stretcher, and she's so terrified that she reaches up and grabs Batman's arm before he walks away, and just has this, like, you can see this realization on his face, and the narration is just talking about how he needs to be a symbol of hope for this city and a comfort for these people. And I think that that's really what they're trying to pull in. I think that they might be trying to pull that in a lot for the next few movies as well. And so I'm super excited to see where they go for that.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a powerful moment. Again, paired with that narration. You know, he's like, vengeance isn't going to solve this. He's been wondering. He's like, I haven't made a difference. That's kind of how the movie starts. He's like, I've been doing this for 2 years now, and things are worse. And then at the end, he realizes it's because vengeance isn't going to solve anything. It's being hope for this city.
And that's what he told Selena.
Yeah. And that's what, and that's been a theme for Batman, at least through like even Christian Bale's Batman. He was talking about how, he's a symbol, right? So I really like how they're harping on that with this character. I think that's going to play in really well in the end. Yeah.
All right, so we haven't given a rating, so we're going to do that to close out the episode. Scale of 1 to 10 non-existent batarangs, Samuel the Hutt.
I'm going to give it a 9.9.
Whoa,
because
that's really high.
I haven't seen it a second time yet, so I'm not giving it a 10 quite yet.
Wow, you really liked this movie.
I really did.
Okay, BB Nate, I'm curious.
I'm sold on a 10. Oh, of course. I'm a 10 out of 10 all the way.
Even, almost 48 hours later, you had a chance to sit with it.
Yes, I've been thinking about it, and I cannot find one problem with this movie. I can't find anything. That the acting was solid throughout. The writing was fantastic. The cinematography was beautiful. The soundtrack was great. The direction was amazing. The story was perfect for Batman. There's nothing about this movie that was bad, which is something you don't see in movies ever. There's always a complaint I normally have, even if it's just a nitpick, but I can't find a nitpick with this movie. And I think that the pacing was on point, even for a 3-hour-long movie. There was never a moment that I felt was slow. There was always something important going on. I think that this movie was just, in the sense of the word, perfect. Like, right as the movie ended, I said, if there was a dictionary for pop culture and you looked under comic book movies for a definition, it should just reference this movie. And that is in a perfect way to say that.
I don't know how you can beat that. As far as that, I mean, I guess I'll give my rating. I was going to give it a 9. And I mean, that's just because
that's still pretty high praise, especially for you.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. It's interesting because you and me, Sam, we finished the movie and we said, this feels like when we watched The Last Jedi the very first time. We know we love this movie, but we just feel like we took so much in. We've got to see it again to really understand what we saw with it. And that's the only reason I'm giving it a 9.
Yeah, that's why I give it a 9.9. I'm like, I just got to see it one more time to make sure.
Well, why don't we go? You guys want to go see it again?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, cool.
All right, we'll bring Mom with her and she'll freak out a little bit. She's going to be.
I cannot wait to see her reaction within like the first 3 minutes when Riddler is just there.
Oh my God, when he just shows up.
The only thing you see at first is just the glasses, and then the light hits him and you're just terrified. Oh, it's fantastic.
The Batman is a powerful film because it helps us see how Bruce Wayne is able to grow beyond the dark vigilante that he starts out to be into a hero committed to bringing justice and hope to the city that he loves. Change is important. We need to be open to those moments in our own lives. Otherwise, we remain stuck in that dark night that consumes Bruce throughout most of this film. Thank you so much for listening to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation about the Batman, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your podcast app of choice. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button on that app so that you get every episode the moment it drops. Our next episode releases on Tuesday. We're going to let BB Nate geek out about all of the cool little comic book references in the Batman. We'll also talk more about Superman and Lois, and of course, throw in some great Star Wars conversation. Make sure you follow the show on that app so you don't miss an episode. And while you're at it, follow Tatooine Sons on Facebook and Twitter and share this episode with somebody else. It's the way that you help this show grow the most. I think that's going to do it for today. There's only one thing left to say.
May the Force be with you always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Join, please.
Yep, yep.